it. Alrighty, you guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast. And I'm super pumped to connect with Marsha Vanwynsberghe today. Marsha, what's going on? How are you?
I am great. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, cool. Well, kick us off and tell us a little bit about you and all the genius you share.
I have a lot of different multifaceted parts to myself. It really boils down to storytelling, sharing our stories, learning how to be authentic, share that with the world. And my life journey took me on that route and it unfolded in ways that surprised me. And I'm grateful for the work that I get to do, but it's led me to creating two podcasts, one that's celebrating episode 450 called Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. And I started long before it was like a thing and it was messy, but that's okay, right? We all start somewhere. And I did that and I released a solo book and I've written and published just about releasing the seventh one. It's all about helping people to learn how to share their stories, share their authentic self, and recognize that our stories make us who we are. So learning how to not hide them and bury them and giving them all the meaning can change your entire life and unlock your freedom.
Yeah, and thanks for
I had
this
to.
the shameless plug there. That's awesome. Well, I love a lot of the words you used in there, especially multidimensional. I think that's so important because people create identities and they work to own it. And it's like identity is what you're most committed to being. And if you have, this identity and like you treat that as like the entirety of your being, you're giving away so much of your infinite like gifts. Like you said, we're
Mhm.
multidimensional beings and we should treat ourselves accordingly. And so, how do you really, first and foremost, somebody's like, "Hey, how do I, step into my voice? How do I own my story? Like, where do you even start?"
That's a great question. It's one of the things, the first questions I like to ask people is what is something that you wish you could share more of yourself with others?
Wow.
Because most people know the answer to that. Like it's like what they're like, ooh, I would love to share that I experienced this when I was younger. I experienced this. Ooh, but I don't want anyone to know. And I'm like, but the reason you subconsciously answered that so fast was because you know what you wish you could share. You know how you wish you could be more real. And when it comes down to that, then we can do very deep dives of looking at a person's story, looking at the lessons that they've learned, what they've experienced, because what it comes down to is the things that we have walked through have made us an expert in who we are. But we tend to hide those parts of ourselves because of the meaning that we give them. And we tend to think that we're the only person who has experienced it because we don't talk about it. And then we just shame just piles and piles and piles on top of that.
And shame, according to Dr. Hawkins in Power versus Force, right? The lowest vibrating energy on the planet.
Lowest one.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a hard place to be. Whenever you're helping people, it's like a lot of people get sideways that I've gotten to work with, and myself included. It's like when we need, like other people to see us a certain way to be okay. And just like, well, I don't want to stand out, like the tall poppy gets cut off, right? And so how do you
Mm-hmm.
people, how do you encourage or help people let go, just let go of needing things to be a certain way to be okay, or whatever it may be.
That's such a great question. And we're not born to fit in. We're like born to stand out. But that feels really scary, right? That's vulnerable and that feels scary. And what it comes down to is sometimes we have to do some work on looking at like what is it that's holding us back? Is it, a parent, a family member, a a sibling, a friend? We like to say that it's all of those things, but I really know deep down that, and because I've walked this path, is that no one will ever judge us more than what we judge ourselves. Like no one does. So we say it is everybody else, and the reason why we're afraid in showing who we are, when in all truth, it's like the judgments that we're putting on ourselves and what we're doing to ourselves that's actually blocking us. And a lot of times, I think because I've walked it and I've seen the results, the people that are in my life today weren't here 5, 7 years ago. So we spend so much time making decisions based on the people who are in our life today, when in all actuality, the people that we are possibly meant to have in our life that can impact us, that we can help and support, we haven't met yet. And they're waiting for us to go forward. They're waiting for us to show up and share who we are so that they can see it. So we have to be very mindful about what it is that is stopping us. A lot of times we say it is the family, it is the thoughts, it is the, what will they say? What will they think? Well, what's the worst case scenario? You show up and share who you are. The people who are, shunning you, wanting you to stay small, now you end up like you're living your worst case scenario anyways. So what if, like when you can start to play in the subconscious, like what if possibilities is what if being vulnerable, learning how to do that in a way that still serves you, right? Like, and I think this is, I always reference Brene Brown, but in a sense, the piece of vulnerability is our path to connection. It's allowing us to connect with the people that we're meant to connect with. Vulnerability doesn't mean I pour out every single detail of my life to you, because that's manipulative. That's not connection. So learning to really be honest with ourselves about what is blocking ourselves. And then when I help them through that process, a lot of times we break it down and look at it and say, okay, actually, those were all just things I've made up in my head because I was afraid of taking a step.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You know, when you talk about vulnerability, I think that is one of the really crucial components to building trust. You know, like because you know what, nobody's infallible, and if you show up with an infallible story, that's hard for people to relate to and connect to. But when
Mm-hmm.
you show up and show people that it's a safe space and you can be vulnerable, it's like a great
Mm-hmm.
model because that's the behavior they're going to exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Gandhi, right? Be the change you want to see. And that's
I,
one of the most
I
brilliant
wear it
quotes.
on my wrist is the Gandhi quote. I do.
That-
It's on my
yeah.
wrist because, and I'm so glad you said that. When you're feeling alone or isolated, and you think no one is coming to support you, no one is coming to help you, why is nobody standing there for you? You literally have to ask the question, like, where can I be the change that I wish to see?
Yeah.
I felt very isolated. I felt very alone. And that quote, it's been on my wrist for probably 7 years now. That quote was the one for me that went, okay, well, how can I be that person so that I can start to connect with people? And every time I find myself in the energy of frustration and anger or shame or resentment or judgment, it's like, no, no, no. Are you actually being the change that you want? No, you're not. You're reacting to what's here. And that quote is like an anchor in my life. So I'm so grateful you said it.
Yeah. Oh man, I think I might say it on every podcast just because I think I'm reminding myself. It's like, and to make it really simple too, because we can like overcomplicate things and get like the monkey mind going, and it's like now I'm back to where I started, except maybe a little more tired because I just worried a bunch, right? And it's like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
super simple. Like, am I choosing love or am I choosing fear? And like
Mm-hmm.
that's like such an easy way to kind of see where I'm at. And like it's okay to feel fear. Like like when you use that word judgment earlier, I think that it's so important that we learn to forgive the judgments we've made, like of ourselves, of other people,
Oh
and
my God.
like it's not
Yes.
about being right, it's about being kind. And if I run through the day being kind as opposed to right with myself and others, like always good things happen as opposed to you know whatever it is I don't want being manifested.
Far better choice.
So when it comes to being a published author of a
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable story, like
Mm-hmm.
what is that like, that transformation from I'm gonna put words in your mouth, but like hiding the story, right, and then
Oh
like
yeah, no,
just
no.
opening it up.
Yeah, you're definitely allowed to put those words in my mouth because I've said them. I was a parent in a nutshell. I was a parent who dealt with teen substance abuse to a level that I would never wish on anyone. And that through that story, I found myself hiding for a long time. When you're dealing with something, and I can just speak to this part of the story, when you're dealing with something like this, I didn't have to wonder what people were thinking. They had no problem saying it. Like people had no problem. I had people coming, no joke. I had people coming and knocking on our door saying things. I had people yelling at us in the parking lot. I had people stopping us in the grocery store. And I mean, we live in a city, so we're not in a small town. But I mean, it wasn't, people knew what was happening. And we were trying everything we could to change what was happening in our family. And it wasn't ours to fix or change, is really what it comes down to. So I hid. That's what I did for a long time, until you carry that armor, you hide to protect yourself. And when you're in that position, home wasn't safe, like work wasn't safe, the stores were, I spent a lot of time in my car. That's not a pity thing. I spent a lot of time in my car because I didn't know where to go, and listening to podcasts and listening to, YouTube videos, because I didn't want to stay where I was, but everything else scared me. And I did work with some counselors, and I did get a lot of support. And I kept saying, there's just no one talking about these difficult stories. And she said, maybe that's because that's what you're supposed to do. And that just, like, it was a mind-blowing moment for me. So through the course of a lot of work and speaking in small groups, small workshops, then smaller stages, then more, then publishing self in a collaborative book. I shared my story 3 times, and then I felt this call that it's time to write my own book. And this is what I'm talking about, in the sense that you have to make decisions for you. If you make them I knew the intention why I wanted to write that book. There's nobody who wanted me to write that book. Let me just share that. I have family saying, we don't talk about things. We don't share it. We don't do, we just don't. And I felt in my gut that I had to write this. And so I did. And so I did it, even though majority of people didn't understand what I was doing. But it's a vulnerable deep dive of me and my story. What do you do when life goes incredibly wrong, not as planned, not according to the path that you thought that it would? And essentially, that's always. Nobody who in their right mind would make the plan to live what I was living. Nobody would do that. So it just becomes this open, that how can you navigate when your plan doesn't go according to plan? And I started sharing my story. Yes, there's reference to my kids, but it's really about me. It's, what do you do when things don't go as planned? So I wrote it. I spent a lot of time working on it, and it was a lot of time alone. And I'm grateful for all of that process. And when the book released, it went into 6 or 7 categories in bestseller, and I was receiving some news and media coverage. I wasn't ready for that. I'm not going to lie. It was like, okay, whoa, I'm not ready to receive this. And so I went back into hiding for a little bit, to be completely honest, because it was a lot. It was a lot to take, because I was getting messages from people from a number of different places. But that was all part of the process. That was all part of what I had to do in order to put that story out there. And the work I get to do today comes from the path I had to walk in order to release that story. So I'm grateful for how uncomfortable it was, and that I followed through anyways.
Yeah, that eliminates the next question. I was like, where is the gratitude in all of that? But you got there without me. So what do you do, or what would you suggest somebody does when, maybe it's not even just a story, but like some sort of performance that people are criticizing or judging, and, what's the best, way you can, I don't know, protect yourself and, practice that self-care, and, also
Oh,
not, protect others from your judgment too, right?
it's a great question. I think that at the end of the day, the best relationship, like the number one relationship you ever have, is one you're going to have with yourself. And being brutally honest with yourself, asking yourself what you need, and doing that. I over the years, I've learned, this is a weird example, but I was in the generation where it was like, you did 3 strength workouts a week, you did 3 cardio, you knew exactly what you were doing. Like, everything was very methodical and worked out. But our bodies change every day. I learned the hard way that my body was changing every day. My mental health was changing every day. My emotional state was changing every day. How could I meet myself with where I was at, and ask that question? So I think that is a really important piece. Is, okay, am I hiding because I don't want to be around other people and I feel so vulnerable? Or am I asking what I need and giving myself the space? Like, am I giving myself the space and listening to what I need? It's very different things, right? It's the same with social media. Am I not going on because I'm afraid of what people are going to think about me, or that I don't know how to show up authentically? Or am I giving myself a break because I deserve to recharge and I need that time for myself? So I would say it's always going back. It's going to come back down to getting to know who you are, asking the questions, going internal, listening to what you need, following through, and then create this feedback loop to say, okay, wow, I actually really needed that time away from my phone. I actually needed that time and space. And that's okay. So when you do share a vulnerable story, it's very exposing. It is very exposing. And again, we're so worried about what everyone is going to think or say about us, especially the people closest to us. But it doesn't take long. And I've seen it for my clients and I've seen it for myself. You're going to start to get the messages to say, thank you for sharing that. I've been following your journey. You're speaking to me. Like, thank you for going first. And I always say to clients, anybody who's listening, like, when you get a message like that, screenshot it and save it in a folder on your phone, because that becomes your reminder that, like, someone somewhere is always praying for the solutions you're holding on to. It's when we make it all about ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to step into what we're all capable of, we're making it about ourselves. That's what's blocking us. So I hope that answers your question, but that's how I tend to look at it.
Yeah, definitely. That was pretty powerful advice, because if I make it all about me, everything's all about me. And what does everything mean
Mm-hmm.
to me? And man, that's a hard place to live. And it's so helpful when
So
I'm
hard.
focused on others. I don't have time to worry about what's going on, or what's in it for me or whatever.
Yeah, you're still making yourself a priority. You're still listening to what you need. Like, you're still doing those things. But if you're stopping because of all of the fear of what everyone else is going to think or say, then I encourage you to recognize that, like, what if your message is meant for someone you haven't met yet? Like, what if it is meant to go out into the world and connect with someone else? Because that's what I've seen firsthand. I can say firsthand, I've seen it so many times. I have so many incredible stories, and they become my reminder that when you get to a space in your story and in your journey and you've learned how to navigate a difficult time, those lessons that you've learned